Time now for morning rounds with CBS News chief medical correspondent Dr. John LaPook and CBS News contributor Dr. Holly Phillips. First up, the White House launches a new effort to help Americans protect their health from the effects of climate change. John spoke with President Obama about the environment's impact on public health. John?
Research suggests heat waves can increase ground-level ozone and help set off an asthma attack. In 1980, just 3% of the U.S. population had asthma. By 2010, that number was over 8%, or 26 million people. The president is pushing to educate people that climate change can affect them personally.
Mr. President, studies suggest most Americans don't connect global warming or climate change with their own personal health.
Right.
Why do you think that is?
Well, because it's not as obvious as some of the environmental issues of the past. With climate change and rising temperatures, some of the effects are slow in registering in the minds of the public. But what we know is this, the planet is getting warmer, the science is indisputable. As a consequence, we know that wildfires are going to be more frequent and longer in intensity. That means more particulates in the air. That's going to have respiratory impacts on people.
When I have a patient come into my office with asthma and they're wheezing, they want their inhaler.
Of course.
They don't want to hear about some long-term solution.
Yeah.
You have two daughters who are teenagers. Are you thinking long-term because of them? Is that somehow part of the equation?
Well, you know, Malia, early on when she was young, had asthma. And we had to visit the emergency room once. So I'm a dad like everybody else. I've seen how scary it is when your kid comes up to you, your 4-year-old, and says, I'm having trouble breathing.
Did that bring it home for you with Malia that, well, this is affecting my daughter? I'm going to do something about it.
You know, there's no doubt about it. In the same way that I think there are families right now in South Florida who see 2 feet of water coming into their house every time it rains and start thinking, you know what, rising temperatures and rising ocean levels are going to affect my property. Part of what I'm trying to communicate here is that there is a cost to inaction.
John, why is the president launching this effort now?
Well, I think he's realizing, as a lot of other people are, that there's a disconnect. You know, people, when they think of global warming or climate change, they're thinking about polar bears, they're thinking about melting glaciers, somebody on the other side of the planet, something environmental. They're not thinking about themselves, their own personal health.
Do you think he wants to get more support for legislation?
Well, it does seem unlikely that any kind of climate change legislation is going to go through when you have Senator Jim Inhofe, who's the head of the Environment and Public Works Committee, throwing a snowball on the floor of the Senate as evidence that climate change doesn't even exist. So I think what he may be doing is just taking it right to the people. And he did hint at that with me, because he said, look, change does not come from the top down. It comes from the bottom up.
Yeah.
When parents and when communities just realize there's something has to be done, and they get together and they say, let's do something.
Next, new safety concerns about weight loss supplements. A study led by researchers at Harvard University found manufacturers could be misleading customers by including a man-made stimulant in products that promote their natural ingredients. This seems so misleading.
It is incredibly misleading, Benita. So researchers analyzed 21 brands of natural, supposedly natural supplements out there. The supplements were supposed to contain something called Acacia rigidula, which is a botanical extract that was supposed to help people lose weight. What they found was that the supplements actually contained something called BMPEA, which is a man-made chemical stimulant. It's quite similar to amphetamine. The reason this is such an issue, though, is that we don't know that that is safe. There haven't been long-term studies done on it. So for manufacturers to put this in their pills without letting the customers know really puts us all at risk.
After this study was released, we should say the Vitamin Shop removed products that may contain BMPEA. But one manufacturer, High Tech Pharmaceuticals, John, refutes the study and stated it is, quote, not the product of reliable scientific principles and methods. Is there any proof these substances are dangerous?
Well, that's the whole thing. So studies haven't been done in humans. Now, in cats and dogs, there's some evidence that when you give it intravenously, their blood pressure and their pulse can go up. So that would be expected with an amphetamine-like drug. So there's no reason to believe that an amphetamine-like drug is not going to cause the same kind of bad harm effects in people as it does, you know, in animals, and that this, if it has amphetamine-like properties, is going to do the same thing. But there's no proof because the studies haven't been done. And that tends to be what we do here. Because this is regulated more like a food, the FDA is not directly saying it's okay when they're not saying this is approved. So you don't have to prove that it's safe before it goes on the market. They wait till something bad happens, and then they possibly can take it off. And that may be going at it backwards.
Well, you mentioned the FDA. CBS News reached out to the agency. They responded by saying they are interested in any new research on these products and will consider taking regulatory action as appropriate and permissible under existing law. So what does that mean?
You know, well, basically, the FDA doesn't regulate dietary supplements the same way they regulate prescription drugs. They regulate those very tightly. Dietary supplements, basically, manufacturers have to regulate themselves. Part of that means whatever they say is in the ingredients list should be there, and anything that's not on the ingredients list shouldn't. Now, when manufacturers don't do that, it's absolutely within the realm of the FDA to step in and say, you aren't regulating yourself, this ingredients list isn't correct, and we're pulling the product. The FDA hasn't done that yet.
And the CDC study showed that this amphetamine-like drug is not in the natural herb. So the thought is it's being spiked.
Next up, a new study offers some good news in the fight against pediatric melanoma. John, tell us about this.
That actually is good news. We've been reporting that incidence of melanoma has been increasing in adults, and finally some good news. This was a study of a national database from 2000 to 2010, and it found that from 2004 to 2010, the incidence of melanoma actually went down almost 12% per year. Now, I was fascinated about why this would be, and I called Laura Campbell, who is the lead author of this, and we discussed the possibilities, and she said, for one thing, kids are spending more time indoors because of screens. That's not such a great reason, right? But also that parents are being more careful. They're putting on suntan lotion, and just as important, or maybe even more important, they're putting on protective clothing. So we're seeing this.
I never remembered my parents really making this a big deal, but I already pulled down the hats and the sunblock for my son, because summertime's here. What should parents do? Right.
Well, parents should still stay vigilant, because, you know, I certainly don't want to put a damper on the good news. These pediatric melanoma cases are dropping, but that's in direct contrast to the overall numbers, which show that melanoma cases are still on the rise. They've been rising for 30 years, and they're still on the rise for adults. We also know that not just with melanoma, with all forms of skin cancer, childhood exposure to sun, particularly sunburn, increases your chances of getting skin cancer later in life. So we still need to work on the sunscreen. Covering clothing is even more effective. Trying to avoid direct sunlight in the hottest hours of the day. All of those things are going to make a difference going forward.
Well, finally, more people are using orange-tinted glasses to block out harmful blue light from cell phones and other electronics. They're supposed to help you get a good night's rest, but do they work? One study published in the Journal of Adolescent Health found teenage boys who wore the glasses felt significantly more sleepy than boys who wore clear glasses. They were so cheap, too. They're like $10 for these glasses.
You know, and you know, there's actually, you know, no arguing with the fact that blue light is stimulating. Blue light from our devices, from our computers. It blocks the melatonin release in our brains that helps us actually get to sleep at night. But, you know, instead of putting on the orange glasses, maybe we could just turn off the device.
And the kids felt significantly more sleepy, and I'm suspecting they also felt significantly more silly wearing these glasses.
Trying to get your kid to wear them could be a challenge. All right, Dr. John LaPook, Dr. Holly Phillips, thanks so much.